What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp quick tutorial for you. So in this video I'm going to model an old covered bridge and I'm going to use a photo as a reference image in order to get the shape right. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our reference image. And this is just an image that I downloaded off the internet. But what we're going to do is you can go ahead and you can delete out your default model. And then you can come in here and what you're going to do is you're going to come up to import. And then once you find your image, you're going to make sure this little option for image is checked. And then you're just going to double click on this to bring it in. And so you can kind of click once to set a base point and then kind of move your mouse and then click again in order to import this. And what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stand this up. So we're just going to activate the rotate tool by tapping the Q key. And then I'm just going to lock this to the red axis by tapping the right arrow key. And so I'm going to click on that corner. And then I'm going to rotate this up. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to model this image basically, or I'm going to trace it so that I get my shape right. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center point of this and then I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to model this once. So I'm just going to come in here and just kind of model along this curve. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You may want to try to get pretty close just so your curve, you may actually want to use the curve tool or the arc tool to model this in here just so that your arcs are kind of following this curve properly so that when you push pull this your curve isn't really choppy. So you can go ahead and come in here and just model this. And then once you fill this in, what's going to happen is that's going to give you a face. So you can see how I have the face in here. Well, once you have the face, what you're going to do is I'm just going to move my image out of the way for right now. And then all that I'm going to do is I'm going to move a copy of this out this way using the move tool. So I tap the M key, so I select this, I tap the M key, I click on the corner, and I tap the control key to create that copy. And then you're just going to use the scale tool to flip it in place. And then once you've done that, you can move this back. You can erase out that center line, and now you've got this symmetrical shape that matches up with what's in this image. So, and the next thing I'm going to do, because if I look at this image, is it looks like this is just kind of a cover on the front side. So it's not actually, the roof is kind of a separate piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the offset tool to offset this out so that I have my roof kind of hanging out. So I just activated the offset tool, I clicked once and then I clicked again to set my offset, and then I'm just going to use inferencing to go ahead and extend these straight down or along the same kind of angle, and then you can come in here and you can erase out your extra. So all these extra lines that this draws in here you don't really need, so you can just use the erase tool to erase them out. And then once we do that, we're going to extrude our roof. So you can see how our roof overhangs forward a little bit. So we're going to push pull this forward first, and then you're going to push pull it back the length that you want this to be. And one thing we may want to do is we may want to go ahead and come in here and set our scale, because what I did originally is I just kind of traced on top of this, but you can see how if I click and I move my mouse to the top of this, that's about 13 feet tall. That may actually not be too far off, but what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll figure that this bridge is probably, we'll call it 20 feet wide from this point to this point. So we'll just come in here with our tape measure tool and we'll click one point and then the other. And then we'll type in 20 feet and hit the enter key. And what that's going to do is that's going to ask you if you want to resize your model. And you're going to go ahead and say yes. So that's just going to resize everything in here. So now if I click down to the bottom, you can see this is actually 20 feet. So, and now what we can do if we want to, just to kind of get some scale, is, well, first of all, we can go ahead and push pull this the rest of the way to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and push pull this, and I'm going to assume this bridge is probably about 50 feet long. So I'm going to push pull that to about 50 feet. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this item. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to click make component, and I'm just going to call this face or bridge face. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to make a copy of it using the move tool, and we can go ahead and measure and see how far back we had this. And you can kind of adjust this so that measurement looks a little bit better. It's a little easier. So that should have left me with a 1 foot 6 inch overhang on the front side here. So if I click from here to here, that gives me 1 foot 6 inches. So now what we can do is we can make a copy of this and we can move it over here. I'm gonna go ahead and flip this. The scale tool is not gonna work this time, so I'm just gonna use the flip along. And I'm gonna say the component's green axis. And then I'm gonna move this back so that it's level with this face. And then I'm gonna move it back another 1 foot 6 inches. So now this is kind of symmetrical on both sides. And what we can do is we can go ahead and we can kind of move our image back if we want to, or we can just kind of draw a line down to what looks like the base of this bridge. So in this case, it looks like if I draw a line from this point down here, that it's about 13 feet to the bottom of these. So what you can do is you can come in here and you can draw a line down that's about 13 feet, so you can kind of see where your ground plane would be. So, and you can kind of go ahead and draw. So, and again, we can just kind of use our image in here to kind of check our measurements. So this little side path over here looks like it's going to be about 9 feet out from this inside point. So I can draw another line down and draw a line about 9 feet out to give me kind of my general width of what my road's going to look like. So I'm using that image to help me a little bit with my proportions. And then what we're going to do is we'll just kind of continue this road along for a ways. You don't have to be super specific with that for right now, but you can just kind of model that in here, and then you can go ahead and move that around and make it longer or shorter. And probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put that in a group so it doesn't merge with everything. I'm going to do the same thing with my roof. So all I did, if you remember, this and this are both components. So I'm just going to triple click in here to select everything. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say make group. Now if I hide that, my faces still show up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to model our structure. So in order to model our structure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a guideline straight down, and I'm going to draw a line to the back right about here. And if you click on this line and you look in the entity info, you can see that's about 48 feet long. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off and I'm actually going to draw just kind of the base of this wall. So I just use the rectangle tool to draw a rectangle over here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and make that a component, and we'll just call that sidewall. And we're going to push pull that up a ways. And so we're just going to keep doing our thing where we kind of measure things on this image in order to get our proportions right. So in this case, I'm going to push pull this up about 7 feet. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of that component over here. And I don't know if I really talked about it quite yet in this video, but the reason for that, the reason I made this as a component is so now any changes I make to this one get made to the other one as well. So that's how components work. When you have multiple instances and you change one, you can change both of them at the same time. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to model our structure. So the structure, we're just going to kind of take a look at this, and what I'm going to do just for simplicity's sake is I'm just going to draw a line down the center of this object for right now as kind of a guide. And then if I take a look, basically this gets divided up. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verticals. And it looks like these are offset a little bit too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this using the divide function, and I'm going to divide it into, so I'm going to divide this into 9 segments. And the reason is because we want, when we divide this up into 9 segments, that means that should give us 8 points in here. And when it gives me 8 points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and for every point, because remember this has a little bit of a layback on the front side there, so we're going to give it that little bit of layback, but then we're just going to come in here and we're just going to model these structural pieces. So in this case, these are probably pretty hefty, so I'm going to go ahead and just come in here and assume that they're just going to be 8 by 8, just for the sake of what we're doing here. And so I'm just going to draw an 8 by 8 rectangle in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. I'm going to deselect this center point and I'm going to make that a component, and I'm just going to call that support post. And the one thing you may want to do is you may want to cut that and then go inside this object and select paste in place. So that way it's actually inside our object. So now when I add these, you can see how they're going to show up on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to extrude these up, and then making sure I'm still in these objects, I'm going to use the move tool to make copies of this to every one of these points. So you can see how if I move this, it'll lock to my point of my segment, and then all I have to do is type in ×8 or ×7 and hit the enter key, and that'll make 7 different copies of this object. So now I've got my individual objects in here. I'll go ahead and group these on the base so they don't merge with anything. And then we're going to do the same thing up top, where we're going to come in here and we're going to model our kind of support posts. So in this case, we'll go ahead and figure this is probably about 12 inches high. Actually, it may be a little more. We'll go ahead and add another 6 inches to it. So we'll make it 18 inches high. We'll make it 8 inches wide. So we'll figure this is a pretty broad support beam. And then we're just going to kind of push-pull this so that it matches up with this object. And you can see how when it does this, kind of shows through this face. That's okay because we're going to extrude that face and give it some thickness in a little while anyway. So we're just going to push-pull that to both ends, just like this. And then we'll go ahead and group that as well. The reason we keep grouping those is so that their geometry isn't really merging. So probably what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to come in here and model some trusses. So that's actually where we're going to wrap up today's video. This video started getting a little bit long, so I figured I'd break it up into 2 parts, just so you didn't have to sit here and listen to me talk for like 35 minutes on this whole thing. So leave a comment below. Let me know, are you interested in seeing the second half of this? Are you enjoying this so far? Just love having that SketchUp conversation with you guys. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider visiting TheSketchUpEssentials.com/support to support the show. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.